Welcome back to another episode of Bianchi Law Talk every Sunday at 5 o'clock. Thank you all for the supports and the shares and all the support that you've given. So today I want to talk about an interesting topic. It's a little bit of a takeoff on last week's topic, and it just happened to be situational. I was on Fox News Night Court with Shannon Bream on Friday. A link to part of that episode is in the description below. And we talked about this case out of Pennsylvania. Now, there's a school, it's a high school, and it has a Christian club there, which is a sanction. That is, it's allowed by the school. And some of the boys and girls there last year on their lunch break had started handing out Bibles in the lunchroom to various people. There wasn't any incidences about it. If people wanted them, they could have them. If not, that was fine too. Well, the students decided that this year they wanted to be able to continue to do that. However, they were stopped by the school, but not for the reasons that you would think. They were stopped by the school for giving out those Bibles, not because it was religious content. No, rather, the school principal says we encourage and welcome people of all faiths, whether it be the Torah or the Koran or the Bible or any other faith-based religion, to be able to have a place in school where they could exercise their rights to freedom of religion and free speech and to be able to talk about faith. They thought that that was an important component. No, the school stopped them from doing it supposedly because they did not follow the policy that the school had established, which requires that they get specific permission to distribute any kind of material, whether it be religious or not. Now, the students disagree with that, and their attorneys who had filed a lawsuit in federal court argued that they did, in fact, get authorization to give out those materials, the Bible, and that this was really pretextual. In other words, the school says that they have a welcoming environment. However, they really don't. In fact, the link that the school gave was that they sent out something to the students from this Christian club that said, look, you're more than welcome on the public sidewalks that abut the school to give out Bibles and religious materials as you see fit, 30 minutes before school and 30 minutes after school. Excuse me, look, my allergies are going. Well, that's a little bit like giving snow in winter. Who is the school to tell them on a public road that's access to any individual, any citizen, certainly that they can exercise their free speech and right to religion on those at any time they see fit? And that does not address the idea that they are being prohibited by the school from being able to exercise their constitutional rights of freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of religion by going to willing students, not proselytizing, but going to willing students and handing out Bibles. It's a really, really interesting case, and I think the school's in a very, very difficult position here, because while they say they are welcoming and that there is nothing wrong with speaking about religion or giving or distributing religious materials, especially at lunchtime when kids are on their free time, they did not articulate that it was causing any kind of problem, any kind of danger at all. In fact, the Supreme Court has been pretty clear that people have a right to be able to vocalize their religious feelings and their freedom of speech rights, and they can't be prohibited unless there is a rational basis for it, very specifically tailored to addressing that issue, and the school is unable to point to one. So I think this is going to go in these students' favors here. What I find really interesting about this conversation is, especially in the context of many of our constitutional rights, is looking at it from the political lens now as opposed to a legal lens or a faith-based lens. And it seems to me interesting that individuals, whether you be conservative or liberal, Republican or Democrat, tend to argue that those rights that they kind of, in their political base kind of supports should never be violated at all, and they should have a right to be able to exercise those freedoms, without any intrusion. Yet, when they disagree with the opponent's political views, they seem to not have a problem when government comes in and limits those actions. I've always found this very, very interesting, because your rights are your rights. They're not Republican rights and Democratic rights. They are your constitutional rights. And every one of your constitutional rights should be jealously guarded, as they said, from intrusion by governmental entities that believe that they can impose their will upon you. Now, I get it. This is a school. It's a public school. And when you deal with religion and public schools, there's going to be controversy. But I suspect that the students are going to win this battle, because there will be an argument that their constitutional rights, freedom of assembly, freedom of speech, and freedom of religion have been improperly deprived by the school without a compelling interest to do that, without a strict scrutiny analysis, as we would say in the constitutional law. So I'm really curious about your thoughts on this topic. Legally, it's one thing, but politically, people tend to view these things very, very differently. Republicans, say, for example, would be very, very positive about the Second Amendment, where maybe the left and the Democrats are not as obviously Second Amendment oriented. Another thing that I find very interesting, I'll just take a little bit of a sidebar, I didn't expect to talk about this, is Roger Stone was recently arrested, and there was a lot of controversy about the manner in which the FBI executed the search warrant and the arrest warrant. So remember, he was arrested, there was an arrest warrant, then there was a search warrant. And President Trump and many others are critiquing the FBI, saying it was overkill. There were over 25, I believe, agents, and they did it at the break of dawn at like 6 o'clock in the morning, and they went in there and executed the warrant. They felt that that was, quote unquote, overkill. Law enforcement will tell you, well, they have to always worry about a danger whenever making a high-profile arrest, and that they had a search warrant so that they were concerned about destruction of evidence. What I find to be curious about this is, having handled many cases and executed many search warrants in my capacity as a prosecutor and working with the federal government, is this is how it's done. I mean, this is what is done. But what's funny to me is that nobody really seems to care about it, or at least one side of the political equation didn't seem to care about it. I mean, no disrespect, when it's happening to an average, ordinary citizen day in and day out. It's only when it's a high-profile public figure that all of a sudden people's attitudes and views change about that, which they really don't care when it's someone else. They only care when it affects them. The reason I bring this up, not that there's a right or wrong answer to this, but there are many issues in the criminal justice system that need desperate reform. And it doesn't seem until the people that are in power, or the people that have money, or the people that are in the position to make the change have it personally touched their lives, that they all of a sudden have this epiphany when so many other people are suffering under some things that need to be corrected in the criminal justice system. I don't think that there's a right-minded person that would tell you that there aren't improvements we can make. So I'm interested in your opinion about this case where the students are prohibited from handing out Bibles to willing students in the school, as well as why is it that we tend to look at law, which is neutral, from a political lens and see it one way when it benefits us, but not be able to have that ability to see it another way when it does not. I mean, it is supposed to be what it is, as opposed to what it benefits you politically from speaking. So I see, Julio, in the end, Islamic students are given prayer areas and times, but Bible is frowned on. You know, that brings up a really good point too. There is, you know, I wondered, I'll just give you a little anecdotal scenario that happened in my career. I had a Bible on my desk when I was prosecutor. I didn't mean to suggest that anybody, all faiths were welcome. I believe that being faith-based is a powerful thing. You can want to be an atheist, that's your thing too. I don't impose that on you, but people were upset that I wore a crucifix ring and that I was very forward about my faith. That's a very important part. We discussed this with some of the comments last week. It is a very important part of who I am in all aspects of my life. It informs my judgments, I think, in an extremely positive, compassionate, merciful way, to the extent that I, as a human being, can do those things. And so, to Julio's point, somebody made an argument that I couldn't try a case with a crucifix ring on because it would be communicating improperly to a jury. I challenged them to bring it up to the court. I would go to the Supreme Court because the only way that ring was coming off is if you chop my finger off. I wasn't taking it off. They didn't pursue it, but I found it interesting, Julio. If I was of another faith, I don't think they would have even had the temerity to have even made the suggestion. And that kind of gets to the point that I'm talking about, where people could see it two separate ways. There are some acceptable prejudices that are still left in our country. I say that a lot about Italian Americans. We can have shows about them. We can call them mob figures and so on and so forth. But God forbid you ever did that with another, ethnic background. You would be put on the crucible, as it were. And I feel a lot of times the same applies to the religious disparity in how people see things they wouldn't think of doing with another faith, but they would have no problem doing it, especially in my mind as it relates to Catholics in particular. And Peter Garino's on, and we had kind of discussed a little bit of that to our I see, trying to figure out what Peter just wrote here. What happened to nor prohibit the free exercise thereof. Yes, so I think you're kind of agreeing with my point. So guys, listen, I'd love to see your commentary. I'd love to be able to respond to it. I'll be on the Law and Crime Network this week, hosting from 12 to 3 on Monday and on Wednesday. We got some fascinating cases there. I always appreciate your support. If you have an opportunity, I'd love you to subscribe to my new YouTube channel at Bianchi Law Talk, as well as if you could share this, because I'd be really interested in what people think about this particular subject, especially as it relates to the free exercise of your religious rights in a school. Was the school going to pay for this or not? I'd like to know your opinion. Have a great week. Have a blessed week. See you soon.